Welcome back, everybody, to another one in my model time-lapse build videos. This is actually going to be episode 3 in a 5-part series where I go through the building of my 5109s. This particular model, bit of a harder kit to find, bit of an older kit. It is, if you haven't seen the title yet, it is the Hobbycraft 148 scale Hispano HA1112 Buchon. Now this was basically a radial engine conversion of a 109G, built by the Spanish in the post-war years and used by the Spanish Air Force throughout the 1950s, eventually used in the filming of the Battle of Britain movie, which is probably the only reason why this aircraft is famous, is because of the movie The Battle of Britain from 1968 or 1969, one of the movies I grew up watching. Now, this is the Hobbycraft kit. Hobbycraft was not known for good kits. It does have its issues. It has a lot of fit problems. It takes a bit of work to get it looking good, but at the end of the day, it looks good. It looks like a Buchon, and it's one of your only options if you want to do this in 148 scale. Now, that being said, I just realized as I'm looking at this instruction booklet. So I built this up using the kit, using the kit instructions, decals, everything out of the box. Most of the decals come for this version right here. It's just 471.28. I decided to do it up as a version in the Canada Aviation and Space Museum, which I grew up going to as a kid. And I just realized as I'm filming this intro, literally about 30 seconds ago, this is the one I'm doing right here, 471.39. That's the airframe that is in the Canada Aviation and Space Museum, and that's the one that I am currently building. But you will get to see the whole process as I go through this. And before we go too much farther in this, my name is Sean, and this is Sean's Aviation. Now, just before we do jump into this video, I'd like to thank everybody who is out there watching these videos. If you haven't yet and you like what you're seeing, down below, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. You'll get notified whenever I release new videos. I try to release 4, maybe 5 a month, depending on the month and depending on how much free time I have. But anytime you like or subscribe, any of that stuff, it helps the analytics. It helps me drive more traffic to this channel. It helps my channel grow. Now, that being said, if you would like to help support this channel monetarily, a little bit more than just liking and subscribing, don't feel obligated to do it, but if that does interest you, down below you'll find a link to my coffee link. You will be able to buy me a coffee, help me out. I always have one going. Little things like that do help me offset some of my costs and whatnot with this channel, and allows me to bring newer and more interesting content out to you guys when you want it. But again, please don't feel obligated. That isn't the point of this channel. This channel is for me to have fun and for you to get to see me have fun. That's the point. That's why we're here. And on that note, let's get into this video. As usual with these aircraft models, I start with the cockpit. These Hobbycraft kits are pretty soft in the details, so it did not take long to get the cockpit together. There's also pretty poor kind of locating markers. A lot of it you just kind of have to guess and make it look right. There's no real easy way of figuring out where everything is supposed to go without looking at some references. So here we are for a quick update before I start moving on anymore with the construction. And so far we have the cockpits completed. A couple of little parts in the bag here I'd like to pull out. So basically we have the main fuselage, sides, the cockpit tub, and then the instrument panel and the armor plate that goes inside the canopy. Everything's been painted. These later versions had the darker gray cockpit as opposed to the light gray cockpit you would have seen if you saw the 109E video. And then the main cockpit has also been painted. Everything's been black washed. Everything's had the detail picked out, and then everything has had a quick dry brush done to pop the colors. And you'll see when it goes together, it fits together quite nicely. It's basically ready for the next step of starting to glue the fuselages together. There's a few little things we'll have to do before I get to that point, but we're basically ready to start gluing the fuselages together. The instrument panels themselves are pretty basic, to be honest. There's no real decal or anything to make it look good. It's just going to have to kind of get glued into place, which I will be doing, I guess, soon. Make sure I get that done to move on to the next step, but I am going to be building this one with the wheels up on a display stand, so I'm not terribly worried about the cockpit itself. It is going to be mostly hidden behind the that coffin-like 109 canopy. So you're not going to see much in there anyways, but it is ready to go. It does look good. For a Hobbycraft kit, I can't complain. I mean, there's decent enough detail that looking into that canopy, it won't look horrible. But not as good as the other ones. But anyways, we're ready to go for that next step. So keep your eyes out on this video, stay tuned, and we'll see the next steps of getting these fuselages glued together and moving on to getting the rest of the airframe together. And then we're almost at paint, so we're getting there. Stay tuned. And here you'll see I'm gluing the fuselage together, and again, it's been a common thread with these Hobbycraft kits. The fit wasn't the best. I had to kind of work my way around the fuselage, gluing it bit by bit to ensure the seam lines did line up properly. And there always are some issues with these kits, so as you'll see, there will be some sanding and filling and whatnot later on to make sure everything looks good. And here you see the first little bit of putty that goes onto the fuselage, and just get it looking good. Trying to get the worst of it done before I get the wings installed. And you'll notice especially around the front, the lower chin intake fit was brutally bad. It took a lot of sanding and puttying to make all of that blend in nicely the way it should be looking. And then you'll see once I get that fuselage more or less cleaned up to where I like it, I get the wings glued on. As usual, I tend to glue the center of it together, and then I'll go along and glue the wing roots later. You'll see I use the tape to kind of pull the wingtip up, get that wing root seam to close, and then I'll run some liquid glue through that just to make sure that there's a nice tight seam and there's minimal puttying and sanding required once the wing is installed. You also make sure you get a good angle of dehydral. A lot of kits, it's a little flat, and this will ensure that everything looks good when it's all done. So here I'm working on the landing gear, and as I do plan to build it with the gear up, the kit really isn't designed for that. So the wheels don't properly fit into the wheel wells. They're a little too thick, so I've had to sand the wheels down in order to ensure that they fit properly in the wheel well. Also, the gear doors themselves are molded in the open position with like an overlapping door, so I've had to cut that off, glue the little piece back onto the end, and then do what I can to kind of make everything look right. A little bit of sanding and puttying and whatnot to blend it all together, and then once it's installed on the fuselage later in the model build, you'll see where it takes some effort to get everything sanded down and cleaned up properly. And then here I start masking the canopies. The usual little bit of Tamiya tape with a sharp blade. Just go through with a bit of a backlight and cut it out based around the kit shapes. If you want to see an in-depth way I do these, the masking, then take a look over at there should be a link here at the top. I have my tips and tricks videos on how I do canopy masking, and it does go through a little bit more detail how I managed to do it this way and save a bit of money on the pre-cut masking. And then here, now that I do have the gear and the landing gear doors glued into place, you'll see I go ahead and mask around the little bit of exposed wheel. And this way I can go ahead and paint the lower color, and I don't have to worry about going back and touching up the landing gear after the fact. And then I get a nice clean look where the gear doors meet the wing, and you're not messing around with puttying and sanding after paint. So here we are looking at a quick mid-build update on the Buchon, and it is looking really good. It was a very simple paint. It was literally just blue on the bottom, silver on the top. The hardest part was just getting these mask lines nice and tight. I can go ahead, I'm going to pull out the masking tape out because I don't need to keep that masked anymore. I probably, obviously, will have to do a little bit of touch-up. Although we'll see how much. There's a little bit of paint issue here. We'll see how it looks once I get that mounted to a stand. I don't think you're going to notice it very much, especially with just a little bit of weathering. That should disappear pretty quickly. So we'll see. But that's pretty much done. At this point, I'm going to do a gloss coat, some decals, and then the props got to be painted. I got to do the spinners, got to be painted silver as well. And then some little detail things. The bottom here is going to be black. I got some cannons to put on. The rockets have to be put on. All those little things. I've still got to drill the hole. I haven't even drilled the hole yet. for the stand. I'll do that soon. My drill was at work. I just brought that home a couple of days ago, so I'll have to do that. I'm gonna use a step drill. I'll show you when I'm doing that. Instead of like twisting and pulling, it works sideways so it doesn't push apart and blow the seam out. So you'll see that when I use it, but we're getting close to that. So anyways, at this point, like I said, next up I'm going to clear coat, and then I'm going to get the decals down, and then we'll move to those next steps. So stay tuned for some more progress on that one. And now that I got a nice good clear down, I ended up using the Future floor polish. It's changed names a few times. I'm not sure exactly what it's called today. I think it's Pledge with Future Shine. The bottle I have is a few years old now, so I'm not too sure what the current iteration of it is. But I use that. It's a self-leveling system. It goes on nice and smooth, and it's super easy to brush on. And then I go ahead and just apply the decals. I used kit decals, and they were surprisingly well. They went down easily. I use Solvaset there as my setting solution, and there's been no issues at all getting them to settle down. They handled everything really well, and I'm actually very impressed with how good these Hobbycraft decals have held up, you know, even 25, 30 years after they were manufactured. So here we are, bit of a mid-build update, or post-decal update, I should say, on the Buchon, and it's decaled. I'm sure if you've been following along, you've seen all that. So there's the current status of the Buchon, and it looks amazing. Yeah, it turned out really, really well. Decals went down flawlessly. There's a little bit of work around the tail I had to do, similar to the Avia, where it's two decal halves and it kind of folded over on itself. But I just had to clean up that trailing edge a little bit. And I think with a bit of weathering and the flat coat, you're not really going to notice it very much. Everything else went down really, really, really nice. I don't have much left to do on it. Baggy is here with the prop and tail wheel and everything like that, so it's just going to be assembled. The prop spinner I still have to do some work on because it's a red and black split. So this back half of the spinner needs to be painted black. I'm going to brush paint that black as well as the back plate. And the reason why I'm deciding to brush paint versus airbrush is because I also have to paint this little antenna hump on the bottom black, and I'll do both of those at the same time, and that will save me the effort of having to mask and all that other stuff. So I got to get that done still. But other than that, really, there's not much left. I'm going to try to get in and paint a little bit of black inside the intake here to hide just the fact that it doesn't go anywhere, it just ends. So I got to touch that up, I got to paint that spinner, and I got to paint this. And then I still have to cut out the exhaust section here, the decal one over the hole. I'm just going to cut that out, install the exhaust after the fact, and then I got to do the bottom. I got the cannons to mount, and I got to get the rockets built. So I'm going to do all that up, and I'll do that near the end. I might even do it once I still have to drill the hole to get this mounted. And I think once I get that done and I have a place to place it, I'll get the rockets put on then. Right near the very end, one of the last things I'm going to do is get those rockets assembled and put on. But I mean, it's a standard Hobbycraft kit. It took a little bit of work to get the seams cleaned up, especially under here. There was some really funky seams going on in here that I had to really clean up. But at the end of the day, it looks really, really good. And I mentioned it at the beginning because I actually filmed the intro just as I was decaling this. I had chose to decide, I didn't know what the scheme was. I knew I wanted to do the silver scheme, but like, what aircraft am I going to do? You know, like, I don't know. I had all of these different options. So I decided I'm going to do the one at the Canada Aviation and Space Museum because I grew up at that museum. I grew up with this. This was my only ME-109 that I had ever known until 1999 when the Aviation Museum got a real 109. Other than that, this was the only ME-109 I'd ever seen for the first 15 or 16 years of my life. This was it. This was an ME-109 in my eyes. You know, the Buchon having been used in the Battle of Britain, I knew the shape with the Merlin engine, and then seeing this in person sitting in the museum was always, you know, that was an ME-109. So I decided to do that, and it was interesting because after the fact I realized, as I mentioned in the intro, the aircraft I was doing was on the box art in the background. But yeah, so anyways, it's got a bit of a personal connection to me, which is nice. So that's where we are. Not much left to go, so stay tuned. We'll get those last few things wrapped up, and we'll get this one finished off and mounted on its base. And for weathering, I just use the standard black tempera paint. I brush it on, and then I wipe it off, and it's just enough to give it a little bit of a dirty look. Nothing too crazy, but enough that it definitely it gives it a slight variation in the paint and just makes those panel lines pop just enough to give it some depth to the aircraft. Looks a little less like a toy. And here I start getting the base prepared. I just use a simple pre-made wooden base from Michael's. Any arts and crafts store will have these kind of things. And then I'm just using a small brass rod as a stand. So you'll see I kind of drill the holes, get the brass rod cut to length, get the hole drilled in the model, get everything assembled, and then I'll stain the base, and then I'll clear coat the base. Couple of layers of clear with some sanding in between to make sure everything's nice and smooth and shiny. And then I'll just epoxy everything together once it's done. And here, as we're getting towards the end of it, I just start doing a lot of the little fiddly bits that I need to install before I can flat coat. Things like these rocket launchers, the rockets themselves, the tail wheels, some of the antenna, the prop, all of that stuff starts to get assembled and mounted. And then I will hit it with a shot of flat coat. And then once the flat coat is finished, I can pull the masking off the canopy and then go ahead and start doing those last little things that you install kind of after you do the flat coat. And then we're getting very, very close to the end here. And just like that, we get to the end. I get this model epoxied to the base, and then we'll take a look at a couple of pictures of the finished product. And that wraps up the building of this Hobbycraft Buchon.
for watching, guys, and as always, if you are interested in any of the content you see, you can access my website at www.seans-aviation.com. You can see all the latest pictures of aircraft and museums and the build logs of all of my current models and past models on that site. And if you're interested in any of this content, please click the subscribe button here on YouTube to follow more. Thank you very much, and see you guys next time.